I'm going to show you how to actually play Mr. Fantastic in Marvel Rivals, how to combo yourself into infinite life, and I'll explain his diverse playstyle to you. This is a bit of an advanced guide though, and Mr. Fantastic is often a misunderstood hero, so if you know absolutely nothing about him, I highly recommend reading his abilities in-game or checking out his hero trailer just to get a little bit of a taste about what he's like. He's technically listed as a duelist by the game, yet many people call him a tank, so what is he really? Well, once you get rid of the sort of overly simplified labels that can mean different things to different people, the playstyle in question can be broken down into a single sentence, maybe a run-on sentence, but a single sentence. Mr. Fantastic is an all-around offensive hero who looks to prioritize staying alive by absorbing damage while supporting the team's activities through damage dealing, shield generation, and generally keeping support heroes alive. If that sounds like a lot to you, that's because it is. A good Mr. Fantastic player knows that you have to continuously adapt throughout the course of every single match. You have to be flexible. Sorry. The duties you have to prioritize though can vary wildly depending on your team, the opposing team, and the current situation you're in. But before we can dig deeper into Mr. Fantastic's playstyle, you 100% need to know his advanced infinite life combo that essentially fuels his character. You start by doing one normal attack, then immediately activate his distended grip so you cancel out of your normal attack. This grabs the opponent and then you press your normal attack button again to pull them in, and once you pull them in, you want to use your flexible elongation for more damage and shields, throw out another normal attack, and then use flexible elongation again. Maybe it sounds a little bit complicated when you say it out loud, but just do this a couple of times in practice and you'll have it memorized in no time. It's not a super complicated combo to do. And assuming everything in your combo has landed, you will enter your inflated state, which gives you tons of shields, more damage, and more speed. You're a total menace to everyone because the more Mr. Fantastic uses his abilities and lands his attacks, the more he fills up his inflation meter, which just gives you big buffs. But what's really important here is that once you exit your inflated state, you can start the combo all over again. So basically, you can just continuously make yourself a huge target that soaks up tons of damage, but also deals lots of damage. In general, you're making yourself the type of hero that the enemy team doesn't want to engage with because it's such a hassle. And of course, sometimes you'll need to simply leave the area after being inflated. Maybe, the situation's too hot, maybe it's changed. So you can always pop off your reflexive rubber stretch, and that will do extra damage absorption. You can even send the damage you absorb back to the enemy up to a point, and you can even use flexible elongation on a teammate to quickly move to them. Despite what you may have heard in some places, no, Mr. Fantastic is not a super effective replacement for a true tank on your team. You're not invincible as Mr. Fantastic. You're good at staying alive, and those are two different things, but tanks are generally better at staying alive. The whole tank thing is not impossible to pull off per se, but it's hugely challenging and it's a low probability way of playing the game. It doesn't make sense in most situations and will just cause you to lose. Think of it like basketball. Yeah, you can sink three-pointers from full court on a technical level, but why would you ever want to rely on that as your core strategy, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So in Mr. Fantastic's case, you generally want to be playing near your frontline tank when possible, whether to their sides or slightly behind them. This will give you some protection thanks to your tank being right there, and you'll be positioning yourself in locations that good healers will already be healing towards. This is really important because Mr. Fantastic is going to need plenty of healing like any frontline hero. It's super important. Once you're in the front line though, you have to assess the situation and figure out if you should be focusing on dealing damage, doing additional tanking, providing backline support, or whether you should be popping off your game-changing ultimate ability. Everything is super situational and changes in every encounter. Sometimes you'll see openings to take out enemy supports directly or maybe through a bit of a flank. Sometimes you'll need to just be a bullet sponge, let the rest of the team get the glory eliminations, kind of the glory plays if you will. Sometimes you'll need to take care of the backline divers. Sometimes you'll need to give shields to your own attackers or defenders. The list goes on and on and on. There isn't a hard and fast rule about what to do here. It's all about effective decision making in the moment, but I'll give you some tips about common scenarios. If you see Doctor Strange, for example, you can usually bully him because your normal attacks hit through his shield. This completely changes the dynamic of Doctor Strange teams, and if you're constantly pushing their main tank backwards, that's giving a lot of awesome area control to your team. If you see heroes like Venom or Psylocke constantly bypassing the front lines, that usually means you should look to take care of them in your own backline, and I'll explain how in a little bit. But if you see squishy or low HP heroes around you in the front lines, you can focus on finishing them off, whether with your swinging normal attacks or through your infinite life combo, or even partial versions of that combo. Mr. Fantastic is really good at getting last hits. And if you have your ult ready and your teammates are in a decent position, you can always beef yourself up and completely disperse the enemy team or even destroy them. More on that in just a moment. The main thing you should always keep in mind is that despite having an infinite life combo, your actual survivability depends on you using it strategically and not simply running your inflated ass into 6 enemy heroes at once. Pretty much every single Mr. Fantastic player has made that mistake at some point, but just remember, when you're inflated, you're not some invincible god, you are just in a buffed state, but it doesn't mean you can just team wipe. Remember, you're not invincible, you're good at staying alive. And by the way, your basic maneuverability is nothing special, so you need to rely on your flexible elongation ability to jump between teammates and enemy heroes quickly. All of this adds up in a phenomenon where Mr. Fantastic looks useless to the untrained eye or to a very low skilled player, especially for those players that think the scoreboard tells the entire story of a match. But the truth is, your matches will be so diverse with Mr. Fantastic that your scoreboard performance will simply be all around. You won't necessarily super excel in any one category compared to the more specialized heroes unless it's a very uneven match, but don't let that bring you down. Those are just numbers, they don't actually mean as much as you might think they mean. Mr. Fantastic is one of those heroes that isn't scoreboard friendly, so if you play him right, you're making dramatic impact in matches in a way that a number just can't properly show. Now remember the infinite life combo from before? And remember I said you can beef yourself up and then pop off a game-changing ultimate ability? Well, if you put those things together, you can get yourself into the inflated state with all of your big fancy shields and buffs, and then you can fire off your ultimate. This will carry you over your shields into your ultimate ability, and you're really going to need it to be a true menace. When you use your ultimate, Mr. Fantastic basically becomes a bouncy ball that can bounce downwards up to 6 times, damaging enemies and slowing them. So for low skilled opposition, comboing into your ult will be an easy way to get many eliminations and just generally rock them. For high skill opposition, it's a little bit different, but comboing into your ult can help you dominate their healers or take care of really any heroes your team is struggling against. You don't do tons of damage, right? But players will have to run away and reposition from it, which gives the rest of your team the chance to take care of them or the objective. So against higher skill enemy teams, your ultimate is more of an area control tool. Just keep in mind that after the initial 3 bounces on the ult, you need to keep hitting enemies in your radius with every bounce if you want to get to the maximum of 6 bounces. Or to put that in another way, after your first 3 bounces, if you miss on the 4th bounce, you just miss everybody on the opposition team, your ultimate comes to an end. Now let's talk about how you can stay alive for even longer as Mr. Fantastic. So his reflexive rubber ability is a great way to increase your shields before or after combos, keep yourself alive for longer, and you can even one-shot lower HP heroes with the abilities absorb damage. So basically when you have that shield up, it takes damage, converts it, through like a lower percentage formula, sends it back out on the enemy. With a cap, you can't just take infinite damage and release infinite damage. But what's extra good about reflexive rubber is that it blocks enemy ults, so you can finally be immune to those pesky ultimates that always get you, whether they're coming from Doctor Strange, Iron Man, maybe in lower elo Scarlet Witch, and so on. So Mr. Fantastic is an ultimate machine. You should also remember that your flexible elongation ability grants you some shields as well as your teammates, which leads me to my next point. Your flexible elongation ability is an important tool for your own maneuverability, but where it truly shines is in the fact that you can use it to keep your backline support teammates safe. If they're getting attacked or they're about to be attacked, you can quickly go from the front lines to the back lines by using flexible elongation to quickly cover a large distance. Many divers simply aren't used to getting counter-dived like that. It's a super effective way of dealing with them. Plus, flexible elongation grants you and your teammates some shields, so it increases survivability nicely. Just remember, if you target the enemy with it, you'll do damage to them instead of granting shields to your teammate. The damage isn't really anything special on its own, so usually if you're going to the backline, you want to be focusing on the shields, not the damage. You can always do damage once you're in the fight with the diver. Also keep in mind that while flexible elongation is super useful for protecting the backline and discouraging divers, you can always use it on the front lines as well if needed. We could probably talk about Mr. Fantastic tech and strategies for hours and hours, but we simply don't have that time, so I'm going to give you some one-off tips before saying goodbye. Don't forget to use Mr. Fantastic's team-up ability with Invisible Woman. It'll simply increase your survivability and further make you the infinite living creature that you were born to be. And don't forget to swing your normal attack punches when dealing with crowds or equipment. Your normal attacks don't pierce, but they can hit multiple things with their stretchiness. Don't just charge forward blindly when you're in your inflated state. It's more useful as a tanky damage absorption tool than a pure offense tool. Of course, there will be scenarios where, you go on the offensive with it, but think of it more as a tanking tool. One thing I do want you to do though is to try to pick off heroes on the front lines or sides when possible, because your attacks, combos, and survivability make Mr. Fantastic a great last hit hero in many situations. And finally, I just want you to be honest with yourself. If you're not having fun with Mr. Fantastic, or if you want to play a less mentally taxing hero, that's totally okay. Marvel Rivals is a video game. You should be having fun playing it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. No, like really, I'll be in your house. I'll be watching you next time.